Close your eyes and let your mind drift backward through time, beyond the reach of clocks and calendars, to a place where mountains touch the sky and ancient fires burn eternal in the darkness. Picture the Valley of Mexico as twilight descends, when the last rays of sunlight catch the stepped pyramids rising like geometric mountains from the earth itself. In this sacred hour between day and night, when shadows grow long and the air fills with the scent of copal incense, the boundary between the physical world and the realm of dreams grows thin. And it is here that we begin our journey into the cosmic tapestry of Aztec mythology. If you have found your way to this quiet corner of the night, seeking stories to accompany your rest or contemplation, then perhaps you understand that some tales are meant to be whispered rather than proclaimed, meant to flow like gentle rivers through the landscape of sleep, rather than crash like thunder through the brightness of day. The myths we will explore together are not mere stories, but cosmic dreams themselves, ancient visions that once explained the very fabric of existence to a civilization that saw the divine in every raindrop, every grain of maize, every beat of the human heart. The Aztecs, who called themselves the Mexica, lived in a world where mythology was not separate from reality, but woven so deeply into the texture of daily life that one could not exist without the other. Their myths were maps of meaning, guiding them through the mysteries of creation, the cycles of time, and the delicate balance between order and chaos that governs all existence. These are stories born from a people who understood that the universe itself dreams, and that we, in our brief mortal existence, are both the dreamers and the dreamed. As we settle into this long night of storytelling, imagine yourself floating above that ancient valley, watching as the cooking fires begin to twinkle like fallen stars, listening as the priests chant their evening prayers to gods whose names carry the weight of thunder and the whisper of wind. The temples stand silent now, their stones holding memories of ceremonies that once synchronized human hearts with the rhythm of the cosmos itself. And in that silence, we can almost hear the echo of those ancient voices still, calling across the centuries with their tales of gods, who bled to create the world of suns that died, so that new worlds might be born of heroes whose deeds rippled through both time and eternity. Tonight, we walk between worlds, between the realm of historical fact and the deeper truth that lives in symbol and story, between the conscious mind and the dreaming soul. And in this liminal space, the gods of ancient Mexico wait to share their secrets with anyone willing to listen with the ear of the heart rather than the mind alone. So breathe deeply, let your shoulders relax, and allow yourself to be carried on the gentle current of these tales, for in the soft darkness of night, even the most terrible truths can be transformed into lullabies, and even the grandest cosmic dramas can become whispered prayers for peaceful sleep, a world between dreams and dawn. In the beginning, before time had learned to count itself in heartbeats or seasons, before the first seed had dreamed of becoming a tree, there existed something so profound and so simple that even now, in our age of electric lights and measured minutes, it defies easy explanation. The ancient storytellers of the Valley of Mexico knew this truth in their bones, felt it in the rhythm of their breath, recognized it in the dance of shadows cast by firelight on temple walls. They understood that creation itself was not a single moment of divine command, but an eternal conversation between opposing forces, a cosmic dialogue that continues even now in the silence between your thoughts and the space between these words. Picture, if you will, the world as the Aztecs knew it, not as a solid globe spinning in empty space, but as a living dream, shared by gods who existed before existence had a name. This was a universe built on the principle of duality, where every truth contained its opposite, where every moment of creation carried within it the seeds of its own destruction, where light and darkness danced together in an eternal embrace that was neither conflict nor harmony, but something altogether more mysterious and more complete. The Valley of Mexico, cradled between volcanic peaks and ancient lake beds, became the stage for this cosmic drama, but it was never merely a geographical location. It was a sacred space, a place where the vertical axis of the universe, connecting the heavens above with the underworld below, intersected with the horizontal plane of human existence. Here in this landscape of water and stone, jade and obsidian, the gods chose to plant their most ambitious dream, a world where mortals could participate in the divine act of creation through their rituals, their sacrifices, their art, and their capacity to remember and retell the stories that held the universe together. The Aztecs lived their lives as conscious participants in a mythology that was still being written, still being dreamed into existence by forces so vast and so intimate that they could be felt in the beating of a hummingbird's wings as easily as in the rumble of distant thunder. They understood that myths were not ancient stories about dead gods, but living maps of meaning, navigation tools for souls, seeking to understand their place in a cosmos that was simultaneously beautiful and terrible, nurturing and demanding, eternal and heartbreakingly fragile. As the sun set each evening over the great city of Tenochtitlan, as the last light faded from the surface of Lake Texcoco, and the first stars began to pierce the deepening sky, the boundary between the mythological and the mundane would dissolve like salt in water. The gods were not distant figures, dwelling in unreachable heavens, but immediate presences that could be encountered in the flight of an eagle, the pattern of rain on temple stones, the face of a newborn child, or the dreams that visit us in the deepest hours of the night. In this twilight realm between sleeping and waking, between the historical and the eternal, we begin to understand why Aztec mythology speaks with such power to those who seek rest and reflection in our modern age. These are not stories that demand our belief so much as our attention, not myths that insist on literal truth so much as deeper meaning, not ancient superstitions, but timeless insights into the nature of existence itself. They remind us that we too live in a universe of mystery and wonder, that we too are participants in a cosmic story that began before we were born and will continue long after we have returned to the earth from which we came. The temples may have fallen silent, the great ceremonies may exist now only in the imagination of historians and dreamers, but the fundamental questions that drove Aztec mythology remain as urgent and as beautiful as ever. What does it mean to be human in a universe of such vast scale and such intimate detail? How do we find meaning in the face of change and impermanence? How do we balance our individual desires with our responsibility to the larger web of existence of which we are part? How do we live with courage and grace in a world where creation and destruction dance together in every moment? These questions echo through the corridors of night, like temple bells calling us to prayer, and in the gentle darkness of this quiet hour, we have the opportunity to listen to them with hearts that are open and minds that are still. The gods of ancient Mexico may speak in voices that are strange to our modern ears, may wear faces that seem foreign to our contemporary understanding, but the truths they carry are as universal as starlight and as personal as the breath that fills our lungs as we prepare to sleep. So let us journey together into these dreams of gods who loved humanity enough to bleed for its creation, into these visions of worlds that died so that new worlds might be born, into these songs of praise and lamentation that rise like incense smoke to touch the face of eternity itself. In the soft embrace of night, even the most cosmic of dramas can become a lullaby. Even the most profound of mysteries can become a gentle companion for the soul's journey toward rest. The five suns, a universe born and broken. Time, as the Aztecs understood it, was not a river flowing in one direction toward some distant sea, but rather a great wheel turning through cycles of creation and destruction, birth and death, hope and catastrophe, each revolution bringing both an ending and a beginning so intertwined that they could not be separated. They knew, with a wisdom that came from watching countless sunrises and sunsets paint the sky above their mountain-ringed valley, that nothing in this universe is permanent, that every age carries within it the seeds of its own transformation, and that what we call endings are merely pauses in an eternal song that knows no final verse. The concept of the five suns represents perhaps the most beautiful and haunting vision of cosmic time ever conceived by human imagination. A mythology that speaks to the deep truth that destruction and creation are not opposing forces, but dance partners in an eternal ballet that gives meaning to existence itself. Each sun was not merely an age or era, but a complete universe, a world with its own laws, its own forms of life, its own particular beauty, and its own inevitable doom. Was a world ruled by Tezcatlipoca, the god of night and sorcery, whose very name means smoking mirror, and who embodied the mysterious depths of consciousness that remain hidden even from ourselves. In this primordial age, the earth was populated by giants, beings of enormous strength. But harmony, in the cosmic understanding of the Aztecs, was not a static state. When Tezcatlipoca lost his foot in a struggle with the earth monster, when his perfect form was broken and his power diminished, the first sun came to its end in a catastrophe of claws and teeth as the jaguars turned upon their giant companions and devoured them beneath a sky that had forgotten how to shine. Under his gentle rule, humanity learned to eat the seeds of wild grasses, and the world was filled with the music of breezes carrying the scents of flowers across vast distances. Yet even in this more refined age, impermanence held sway. And when the cosmic tensions that always exist between order and chaos reached their breaking point, great hurricanes swept across the earth, transforming the inhabitants into monkeys who swung through the trees that somehow survived the devastating winds. In this transformation, we see the Aztec understanding that nothing is ever truly lost, that even catastrophe contains within it the possibility of adaptation and survival, though in forms we might not immediately recognize. The ancient god of rain and fertility, whose dominion brought forth the first true agriculture, as humans learned to cultivate maize and beans in the rich volcanic soil of their valley home. This was an age of abundance and growth, when the partnership between human ingenuity and divine blessing created a civilization of unprecedented prosperity and peace. Yet even abundance contains its own dangers, and when the people began to take their blessings for granted, when they forgot to offer proper gratitude to the gods who sustained them, the heavens opened in a deluge of fire rather than water, and the third sun ended in a rain of flame that transformed its inhabitants into birds, who could escape the burning earth by taking flight toward the stars. The fourth sun, Nehuiatl, or Forewater, saw the rise of a people who had learned the lessons of impermanence and lived their lives with constant awareness of the fragility of existence. They honored the gods with elaborate ceremonies, created art of surpassing beauty, and developed systems of knowledge that allowed them to predict the movements of celestial bodies and the changing of seasons with remarkable accuracy. Yet knowledge, like abundance, carries its own perils, and when human wisdom began to rival that of the gods themselves, when mortals started to believe they could control rather than simply participate in the cosmic order, the fourth sun ended in a great flood that covered even the highest mountains, transforming the people into fish who could survive in the new world of endless water. Between each sun and the next lay periods of darkness and silence, cosmic nights when the gods would withdraw to consider what had been learned from the previous age and to dream new possibilities for the age to come. These were not empty times, but pregnant pauses, moments of infinite potential when anything might emerge from the void. When the very nature of existence hung in the balance like a dewdrop trembling on the edge of a leaf in the moments before dawn. In these interludes, the gods themselves would change and grow, would incorporate the lessons of each failed world into their understanding of what it meant to create life that could endure, not through permanence, but through the ability to transform itself in response to changing circumstances. Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, whose daily journey across the sky represents the eternal struggle between light and darkness, order and chaos, life and death that defines our current age. This is a world of movement and change, where nothing remains the same from one moment to the next, where growth and decay dance together in every living thing, where humans have learned to live with uncertainty as their constant companion. Yet, even this sun, our sun, carries within it the promise of its own ending. For the Aztecs knew that form movement must eventually give way to earthquakes that will shake the foundations of existence, itself preparing the way for whatever new form of beauty and terror will emerge from the creative destruction that defines the cosmic cycle. In the soft darkness of night, as we listen to these ancient stories of worlds that were and worlds that might yet be, we can hear echoes of our own experience of time as something that both carries us forward and cycles us back, that brings both loss and renewal, that teaches us to love what is transient precisely because it will not last forever. The five suns remind us that we are not separate from the cosmic process, but participants in it, that our individual lives and deaths are notes in a symphony that began before time, had a name, and will continue long after our particular melody has faded into the greater music of existence itself. As the night deepens around us and the boundaries between sleeping and waking begin to soften, we can feel ourselves becoming part of this eternal story, part of this cosmic wheel that turns through darkness and light, creation and destruction, beginning and ending in an endless dance that is both the most terrible and the most beautiful truth. In understanding the five suns, we begin to understand ourselves, not as isolated individuals clinging to permanence in a world of change, but as expressions of the same creative force that dreams worlds into being and loves them enough to let them go when their time has come to an end. The primordial gods and the birth of duality. in the vast silence that preceded all creation, before the first word was spoken, or the first star learned to shine. There existed a unity so complete and so perfect that it contained within itself all possibilities, all potentials, all the countless forms that existence might one day take. Yet, unity in the profound understanding of Aztec cosmology was not a static state of being, but a dynamic tension between complementary forces, and from this tension arose the first and greatest of all divine mysteries, the recognition that oneness could only be fully expressed through the dance of two. Ometéotl and Ometéotl, whose names translate as Lord of Duality and Lady of Duality, were not separate deities in the sense that we might usually understand gods to be, but rather two aspects of a single cosmic principle so fundamental that it underlies every other form of existence. They were the divine masculine and feminine, the active and receptive, the light and darkness, the expansion and contraction that together create the rhythm by which the universe breathes itself into being moment by moment by moment, in their eternal embrace. Neither dominant nor dominated, neither creator nor created, but both, and neither and something altogether beyond such simple distinctions. All of creation found its source and its meaning. Picture them, if you can, not as beings with human form and human limitations, but as principles of existence itself, as the fundamental polarity that allows anything to exist at all. They dwelt in the 13th heaven, the highest level of the cosmic pyramid, in a realm called Tlaloc, the place of duality, where time had not yet learned to distinguish between past and future, where space had not yet divided itself into here and there, where all contradictions were resolved, not through the victory of one side over another, but through their perfect synthesis into something greater than either could be alone. From their union, which was simultaneously a joining and a separation, a coming together and a setting apart, arose the four Tezcatlipocas, the four aspects of divine consciousness that would shape and govern the material universe. Each was born as a color and a direction, a season and a quality of being that would infuse all of creation with its particular essence. The red Tezcatlipoca of the East, who would become known as Totec, brought the energy of renewal and transformation, the power of death that makes new life possible. The blue Tezcatlipoca of the South, who would become Huitzilopochtli, carried the fierce intensity of the sun at noon, the courage needed to face each new day despite the certainty of its ending. The white Tezcatlipoca of the West, who would become Quetzalcóatl, embodied wisdom and wind, the subtle intelligence that moves between all things and connects them in an invisible web of meaning. The black Tezcatlipoca of the North retained the name of his cosmic principle, becoming the Lord of Night and Sorcery, the keeper of hidden knowledge and the guardian of mysteries too profound for easy understanding. These four sons of duality were not created in sequence, one after another, like children born to mortal parents, but emerged simultaneously from the cosmic womb of possibility, like the four directions themselves, each defined by its relationship to the others, each finding its meaning in the dynamic tension that existed between them. They were, in essence, the first family, the original brotherhood, the primordial community that established the pattern for all future relationships between distinct beings who nevertheless share a common source and a common destiny. The beauty of this creation story lies not in its complexity, but in its elegant simplicity. Its recognition that all the countless forms of existence that we see around us, from the smallest grain of sand to the largest star, from the briefest thought to the most enduring love, are variations on a single theme, the eternal dance between unity and multiplicity, between the one and the many, between the desire to merge and the need to remain distinct. The Aztecs understood that this duality was not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be celebrated, not a conflict to be resolved, but a creative tension to be maintained through all the cycles of cosmic time. In the gentle darkness of night, as we listen to these ancient stories of the gods who gave birth to all other gods, we can begin to sense within ourselves the same fundamental duality that moves through all existence. We are simultaneously individual and universal, temporary and eternal, physical and spiritual, conscious and unconscious. And it is precisely this internal tension that gives our lives their meaning and their poignancy. We are not mistakes in a universe that should be simple, but expressions of a cosmic principle that finds its fullest manifestation in beings capable of containing contradictions without being destroyed by them. The Lord and Lady of Duality continue to embrace in the highest heaven, continue to dream new possibilities into existence, continue to breathe the rhythm that sustains all worlds, all ages, all forms of life and consciousness. Their love is not the exclusive passion of two separate beings, but the inclusive compassion that recognizes all apparent opposites as faces of a single underlying reality. In their union, the masculine does not dominate the feminine, nor the feminine the masculine, but both are transformed into something that transcends gender, while honoring the unique gifts that each brings to the cosmic dance. As we drift deeper into the contemplative space that opens in the quiet hours of night, we can feel ourselves participating in this same dance of duality, recognizing in our own breathing the same rhythm that first created the gods, feeling in our own heartbeat the same pulse that drives the wheel of the suns through their endless cycles of creation and destruction. We are not separate from the cosmic process, but embodiments of it, not observers of the divine drama, but participants in it, not seeking to escape from duality, but learning to dance with it as gracefully as the gods themselves. The wisdom of Ometéotl and Ometéotl whispers through the darkness like a gentle wind carrying the scent of flowers from some celestial garden, reminding us that we need not choose between unity and diversity, between belonging and autonomy, between love and freedom, but can instead find our deepest fulfillment in the creative tension that exists between all such apparent opposites. In understanding the birth of duality from unity, we begin to understand our own nature as beings who are simultaneously one and many, finite and infinite, mortal and divine, and in that understanding we find not confusion but profound peace. Quetzalcóatl and Tezcatlipoca brokers and rivals. In the cosmic drama of Aztec mythology, no relationship is more complex, more fascinating, or more fundamental to the structure of existence itself than the eternal dance between Quetzalcóatl and Tezcatlipoca, the feathered serpent and the smoking mirror, the god of wisdom and wind, and the god of night and sorcery. Brothers born from the same divine source, yet forever locked in a dynamic opposition that creates and destroys worlds, shapes civilizations, and defines the very nature of consciousness itself. Their story is simultaneously the most intimate of family sagas and the most universal of cosmic principles. A tale of sibling rivalry that plays out not just in the heavens but in every human heart that has ever struggled to balance wisdom with power, light with darkness, the desire to create with the urge to destroy. Imagine them in the early moments of creation, when the first four gods emerged from the cosmic duality of their divine parents. each claiming a direction and a color, each embodying a particular aspect of the consciousness that would shape the material universe. Quetzalcóatl, the white Tezcatlipoca of the West, carried within his nature the marriage of earth and sky, the synthesis of the serpent's ancient wisdom with the bird's soaring vision, the principle of intelligence that seeks always to connect and unify rather than to separate and dominate. Tezcatlipoca, the black Tezcatlipoca of the North, embodied the mysterious depths of awareness itself, the hidden knowledge that dwells in shadow, the power that comes from accepting rather than denying the darker aspects of existence, the recognition that creation and destruction are not opposite forces but two faces of the same cosmic process. In the beginning, their opposition was creative rather than destructive, a dynamic tension that generated the energy necessary to bring new forms of life into being. When the time came to create the earth itself, it was through their collaboration and conflict that the great earth monster Tlaloc was defeated and transformed, her body becoming the foundation upon which all terrestrial life would flourish. Yet even in this victory, the seeds of future discord were sown. For Tezcatlipoca lost his foot in the struggle, and from that primal wound arose a resentment that would echo through all subsequent ages, a sense of incompleteness that could only be healed through the ongoing dance of creation and destruction. The first sun belonged to Tezcatlipoca, and under his rule, the world was populated by giants who lived in harmony with the great jaguars, a civilization that honored the darker mysteries of existence and found beauty in the fierce realities of predator and prey, life and death, the hunt and the hunted. Yet Quetzalcóatl, perhaps driven by compassion for beings he saw as living in ignorance, perhaps motivated by his own desire to shape the world according to his vision of wisdom and harmony, struck down his brother with a great club, ending the first sun and transforming its inhabitants into the jaguars, who would devour the giants in a cosmic reversal that established the pattern for all future catastrophes. The second sun became Quetzalcóatl's age, a time of greater refinement and learning. When humanity first discovered the seeds of wild grasses and began the long journey toward agriculture and civilization. Under the feathered serpent's gentle guidance, the world became a place of beauty and wonder, where the wind carried the songs of birds across vast distances, where knowledge was honored above strength, where the arts of healing and divination flourished like flowers in an eternal spring. Yet Tezcatlipoca, nursing his ancient wound and his growing resentment, could not allow his brother's vision to reach completion, and he manifested himself as a great jaguar god, challenging Quetzalcóatl to a cosmic wrestling match that ended with the god of wind being cast down from heaven and the second sun ending in the great hurricanes that transcend its proud its pen with its pembeen in bad to pain in pin is in way be will with his so you would get with the little girl but I do for with why we to your dad up to I but I thought to do ya pa welcome if the wa go do if them I back if they would tell you what it is Thus began the pattern that would repeat through all the ages of cosmic time, a cycle of creation and destruction, driven not by malice or evil, but by the fundamental tension between two different approaches to existence itself. Quetzalcóatl represented the principle of evolution and growth, the belief that consciousness could and should develop toward greater complexity, greater wisdom, greater harmony with the underlying patterns of creation. Tezcatlipoca embodied the equally valid principle of revolution and renewal, the understanding that all forms of order eventually become stagnant and must be periodically destroyed so that new possibilities can emerge from the creative chaos of change. Their rivalry was most beautifully and tragically expressed in the story of Tlaloc, the legendary city where Quetzalcóatl appeared in human form as the priest-king Tlaloc, ruling with such wisdom and benevolence that his reign became the golden age against which all future civilizations would be measured. Under his guidance, the people of Tlaloc achieved heights of artistic and spiritual development that seemed to promise a permanent solution to the problems of human existence, a society that had finally learned to live in harmony with both the natural world and the divine order that underlies it. Yet, Tezcatlipoca, perhaps recognizing that such perfection would mean the end of growth and change, perhaps simply unable to resist the opportunity to humble his eternally optimistic brother, appeared in the city disguised as various forms of temptation and chaos. He came as an old man selling green chiles that made people dance uncontrollably until they died of exhaustion, as a warrior whose naked body caused such scandal that riots broke out in the marketplace, as a sorcerer who convinced the people to offer human sacrifices to ward off disasters that he himself had created. Most devastatingly, he came as a wise counselor who convinced Quetzalcóatl himself to drink pulque, the fermented cactus wine that loosened the god's careful control over his desires and led him to break his vows of celibacy with his own sister. The morning after this cosmic fall from grace, Quetzalcóatl awoke to find himself naked and ashamed, his perfect kingdom in ruins, his people scattered or dead, his vision of a harmonious world shattered like a mirror dropped from a great height. In his grief and self-recrimination, he built a funeral pyre and threw himself into the flames. And from his burning body arose the planet Venus, the morning star that heralds each new dawn, while his heart ascended to become the constellation we know as the Pleiades, a cluster of stars that reminds us that even in destruction, beauty can be born. Yet the story does not end with this apparent defeat. For Quetzalcóatl's sacrifice became the foundation for the fifth sun, our current age, in which his spirit continues to work through those who choose wisdom over power, creativity over destruction, the patient cultivation of understanding over the quick satisfaction of dominance. Tezcatlipoca, meanwhile, rules as the lord of the present moment, the god of the here and now, the divine principle that reminds us that all forms of order are temporary, all achievements are fragile, all civilizations carry within them the seeds of their own transformation. In the gentle darkness of night, as we listen to this ancient story of divine siblings whose love and rivalry shapes the cosmic order itself, we can recognize within ourselves the same tension between the Quetzalcóatl, who seeks always to build and create, and the Tezcatlipoca, who knows that sometimes destruction is necessary for new life to emerge. We are neither purely wise nor purely powerful, neither wholly constructive nor entirely destructive, but complex beings who contain both brothers within our own consciousness, and our task is not to eliminate one in favor of the other, but to learn to dance with both as gracefully as the gods themselves. The eternal contest between Quetzalcóatl and Tezcatlipoca continues in every choice we make between compassion and justice, between the desire to protect what we love and the need to allow it to change and grow, between the safety of known patterns and the risk of exploring new possibilities. In understanding their relationship, we begin to understand the dynamic nature of existence itself. The recognition that life is not a problem to be solved, but a dance to be danced. Not a war to be won, but a creative collaboration between apparent opposites that generates all the beauty and terror and wonder of the world in which we find ourselves blessed to participate. The labors of the gods, blood, sacrifice, and creation. In the profound cosmology of the Aztecs, creation was never understood as a simple act of divine will, a single moment when gods spoke worlds into existence through the power of command alone, but rather as an ongoing process of sacrifice and renewal, a continuous offering of divine essence that sustains the universe from moment to moment, like blood flowing through the veins of a vast cosmic body. This understanding, which may seem strange or even disturbing to modern sensibilities accustomed to thinking of creation as effortless divine magic, reveals one of the most beautiful and challenging insights in all of human mythology. The recognition that love expresses itself most completely through sacrifice, that life can only be sustained through the willing gift of life, of hand, of self. If self is spesen to it, be self, sell is sell it, of support suyu, to agiu of bugabab octave above tukta uriah to the if used to you are do to above the dog I'm with a by sisters is what I'm my papa would with the fool you and that the gods who created us did so not from a position of unlimited power, but from a place of generous vulnerability that continues to this day. The most moving and significant of all these divine sacrifices occurred in the cosmic council held after the destruction of the fourth sun, when the assembled gods recognized that the time had come to create a new source of light and warmth for the world that would emerge from the great flood. The sun that had illuminated previous ages was gone, consumed in the catastrophe that ended the age of forewater, and without a new sun, the fifth world would remain forever in darkness, a realm of eternal night where no life could flourish and no consciousness could grow toward understanding of its divine source. To gods volunteered for the sacrifice that would be necessary to birth this new sun, Tezcatlipoca, whose name means Lord of the Conch Shell, a proud and wealthy deity who adorned himself with precious feathers and jewels and jade ornaments that reflected his elevated status among the divine community. And Tonatiuh, whose name means Little Pocked One, a humble god whose body was covered with sores and boils, who possessed nothing of material value, but who carried within his wounded form a heart of such pure love that it shone brighter than all the treasures of heaven combined. For 4 days, these two gods prepared themselves for the ultimate sacrifice, fasting and doing penance, offering gifts to the sacred fire that had been kindled at the center of the cosmic council chamber. Tezcatlipoca, befitting his status and wealth, offered precious feathers instead of palm fronds, balls of gold instead of grass balls, jade and coral instead of maguey thorns, and instead of his own blood, he offered the sacred copal incense that was worth more than all the treasures of the mortal world. Tonatiuh, having nothing of material value to give, offered simple reeds, balls of grass, maguey thorns stained with his own blood, and scabs from his diseased body as incense, gifts that the other gods might have scorned, but which carried within them the essence of absolute sincerity and total self-pouring. Glittering in the firelight, his proud bearing reflecting his confidence in his worthiness for this cosmic honor. Yet when he felt the terrible heat of the sacred fire, when he saw the fierce tongues of flame that would consume his divine form and transform it into solar radiance, sacrifice that would transform him into the sun. Then Nanahuatzin, the humble god whom none would have chosen for this ultimate honor, the wounded deity whose very appearance reminded all who saw him of the suffering that attends all existence, stepped forward without hesitation and threw himself into the heart of the sacred fire. The sun under which we still live, whose daily journey across the sky reminds us that the light by which we see and the warmth by which we live are gifts, freely given by a God who loved creation more than he loved his own continued existence. Tezcatlipoca, shamed by the humble god's courage and inspired by his example, finally found the strength to follow Nanahuatzin into the flames, but by then the fire had burned lower. Yet, even this apparent failure became a gift to creation, for the moon's gentler light illuminates the darkness of night, providing a softer radiance for those who seek rest and contemplation in the quiet hours, when the sun's fierce energy has passed beyond the horizon. But the sacrifice of the gods did not end with the creation of the sun and moon, for when the newly born sun remained motionless in the sky, the assembled deities realized that light alone was not sufficient to sustain the cosmic order. The sun needed energy to move across the heavens, needed strength to battle the forces of darkness that would otherwise engulf the world in eternal night. And this energy could only be provided through the continued sacrifice of divine blood. One by one, all the gods opened their veins and offered their life essence to feed the newborn sun. The understanding that life can only be sustained through the willing offering of life itself. This divine precedent established the sacred obligation that would shape Aztec civilization for centuries to come. The recognition that human beings, as conscious participants in the cosmic order, had a responsibility to contribute their own life energy to the maintenance of the universe that sustained them. The elaborate rituals of blood sacrifice that characterized Aztec religious practice were not expressions of primitive cruelty or mindless superstition, but sophisticated liturgical reenactments of the cosmic drama that created and continues to sustain the world's ceremonies designed to align human consciousness with divine consciousness through the shared experience of sacrifice and renewal. Yet the deepest truth embedded in these stories of divine sacrifice extends far beyond the specific practices of any single culture or historical period, touching something universal in the human experience of love and loss. The gods who bled to create the world remind us that love is not a feeling but an action, not a sentiment but a sacrifice, not a reward for good behavior but a gift freely given even when it is not deserved or appreciated. In the soft embrace of night, as we listen to these ancient stories of gods who gave their lives so that life itself might continue, every act of kindness, every moment of patient teaching, every decision to choose love over fear or hope, over despair, is a small reenactment of the cosmic sacrifice that brought the sun into being, a participation in the divine love that sustains the universe through all its cycles of creation and destruction. The blood that flows through our veins carries within it the same divine essence that the gods offered to kindle the fifth sun, and every heartbeat is both a gift received and a gift given, both a celebration of the life we have been granted and a contribution to the cosmic energy that will sustain future generations of consciousness. Long after our individual forms have returned to the earth from which they came, in understanding the labors of the gods, selves for the sake of something larger and more beautiful and more enduring than any individual life could ever be. The lords of the underworld, Mictlan's silent kingdom, beneath the world of sunlight and shadow, beyond the reach of the daily drama of creation and destruction that plays out under the fifth sun. There exists a realm of profound stillness and eternal patience, meaningless in the face of distances that can only be measured in years of careful traveling, and trials that can only be completed through the accumulated wisdom of countless lifetimes. This is Mictlan, the Aztec underworld, not a place of punishment or torment in the sense that other mythologies might conceive it, but rather a vast landscape of transformation, where the souls of the dead undergo the slow and necessary process of returning to the source from which all consciousness originally emerged. Is not the opposite of life, but simply another form of existence, another way of being that consciousness assumes when it has finished with the particular lessons and experiences that can only be learned through incarnation in the world of the living. These divine rulers were not fearsome demons or wrathful judges, but rather patient gardeners of souls. The Lord of the Dead was often depicted as a skeletal figure adorned with owl feathers and jade ornaments, his bones gleaming white as polished marble, his empty eye sockets containing not darkness but a profound stillness that reflected the peace that comes when all desires have been fulfilled and all questions have been answered. Her skull decorated with marigold flowers and her teeth filed to sharp points, not as symbols of danger, but as indications of her ability to consume all illusions and leave only the essential truth of what each soul had become through its journey in the land of the living. Together, they presided over a realm of 9 levels, each representing a different stage in the soul's journey toward final integration with the cosmic order. These were not levels of punishment or reward based on moral judgments about how well or poorly a person had lived their earthly life, but rather stations in a process of gradual purification and understanding, places where different aspects of personal identity and earthly attachment could be examined, processed, and ultimately released so that the essential core of consciousness could continue its evolution toward ever greater wisdom and compassion. The journey through Mictlan began immediately upon death, when the deceased would be provided with offerings of food, water, tools, and companionship for the long road ahead, gifts from living relatives who understood that love does not end with physical separation, but continues to flow between the worlds of the living and the dead through the bonds of memory and care. The soul would be accompanied by a dog, preferably a reddish-colored Zeloit Squintly, whose psychic sensitivity would help guide the consciousness through realms where the familiar landmarks of physical existence no longer provided reliable orientation. The first trial came at the River of Scorpions, where the departed soul had to cross waters filled with creatures whose stings could cause the final death of consciousness, itself the complete dissolution of individual identity into the cosmic void. Only those who had learned during their earthly life to face their fears with courage and to trust in forces larger than their own will could successfully navigate this crossing, carried safely to the far shore by their canine guide and protected by the spiritual strength they had accumulated through a lifetime of conscious evolution. The second level required passage between 2 enormous mountains that crashed together with the rhythm of a cosmic heartbeat, opening and closing with such precise timing that only souls who had learned perfect patience during their earthly incarnation could find the exact moment when safe passage was possible. This trial taught the newly dead that the universe operates according to its own deep rhythms, and that wisdom lies not in forcing one's will upon these patterns, but in learning to harmonize with them as a musician harmonizes with the underlying beat of a song. Subsequent levels presented trials that tested every aspect of the soul's development, crossing rivers of blood that represented all the violence the person had either committed or failed to prevent during their lifetime, climbing mountains of obsidian knives that cut away all illusions about personal importance or special status, traversing deserts where freezing winds stripped away every memory that was not essential to the soul's core identity, and finally entering chambers where wild beasts would devour any remaining traces of ego or attachment that might prevent final reunion with the source of all consciousness. The journey through all 9 levels of Mictlan took 4 years of earthly time, though within the underworld itself these years might be experienced as moments or as eternities, depending on the soul's level of spiritual development and its willingness to surrender the familiar comforts of individual identity in favor of participation in the larger cosmic consciousness that had always been its true home. During this time, the living would continue to honor their departed loved ones with offerings and ceremonies, understanding that their prayers and gifts could ease the soul's passage through the more difficult trials and provide spiritual nourishment for the long journey ahead. Yet not all souls followed the same path through Mictlan, for the Aztecs recognized that different kinds of death created different opportunities for spiritual evolution. Warriors who died in battle and women who died in childbirth were understood to have already completed many of the lessons that Mictlan was designed to teach, and their souls ascended directly to the paradise of the sun god, where they could continue their evolution through participation in the cosmic battle between light and darkness that defines each day's cycle. Children who died before they had accumulated significant earthly karma went to a special realm ruled by the goddess Ometéotl, where they could complete their development in an environment of perfect love and protection. The final destination for most souls who completed the journey through Mictlan was not extinction, but rather a form of existence so different from individual consciousness that it could only be described through paradoxes and metaphors. They became part of the cosmic dream that dreams all worlds into existence, part of the divine consciousness that experiences itself through countless individual perspectives, part of the eternal creativity that continuously gives birth to new forms of beauty and meaning throughout the endless cycles of cosmic time. In the gentle darkness of night, as we contemplate these ancient visions of what awaits consciousness beyond the threshold of physical death, we can find both comfort and challenge in the Aztec, understanding that dying is not a failure or a punishment, but simply another stage in the endless adventure of existence itself. The lords of the dead remind us that our individual personalities, precious as they are to us now, are ultimately temporary costumes that consciousness wears for the brief dance of a single lifetime, and that our deeper identity transcends any particular incarnation, while still being enriched by every experience we gather during our time in the world of the living. Mictlan's silent kingdom continues to receive the souls of the departed, continues to offer its patient teachings about the true nature of identity, and attachment continues to serve as the cosmic recycling center where the raw materials of consciousness are processed and prepared for their next stage of evolution. In understanding its mysteries, we begin to lose our fear of death, and to see it instead as a doorway to deeper understanding. A graduation from one level of cosmic school to another, a transformation that is both ending and beginning, both loss and gain, both the completion of one magnificent journey and the commencement of another. The pantheon of everyday life, gods of rain, maize, and war. While the cosmic dramas of creation and destruction, the eternal rivalries between brother gods, and the profound mysteries of death and transformation provided the grand mythological framework within which the Aztecs understood their place in the universe. The daily rhythm of their lives was sustained and sanctified by a host of more intimate deities, whose concerns were as immediate as the next harvest, as urgent as the need for rain, as personal as the protection of family and community from the countless dangers that threatened human existence, in a world where the boundary between the natural and supernatural was as thin as morning mist over Lake Texcoco. These gods of everyday life were not distant cosmic principles, but immediate presences who could be felt in the texture of maize dough between the fingers, in the first drops of rain falling on dry earth, in the courage that rose in a warrior's heart as he faced overwhelming odds on the battlefield. They were the divine forces that made ordinary life possible, that transformed the simple acts of farming and cooking and fighting and loving into sacred ceremonies that connected human consciousness with the creative powers that sustained the universe itself. Perhaps no deity was more essential to Aztec daily life than Tlaloc, the ancient rain god, whose dominion over water made him the ultimate source of all agricultural abundance, and, by extension, all civilization itself. Tlaloc was depicted with goggling eyes like pools of still water, and fanged teeth like the jagged edges of storm clouds. His face painted with the blue and white colors of sky and cloud, his body adorned with symbols of lightning and thunder that marked him as the master of the celestial powers that could bring either life-giving rain or devastating floods to the valley below. His mountain palace Tlalocan was imagined as an eternal spring where maize grew perpetually green and ripe, where butterflies danced among flowers that never faded, where the sound of falling water created a music so beautiful that those who heard it could never again be completely satisfied with the silence of the mortal world. This paradise was the destination for those who died by drowning, by lightning strike, or from diseases associated with water, and their souls were understood to become part of Tlaloc's vast household, helping to prepare the rains that would nourish future generations of crops and sustain the continuing cycle of agricultural abundance. The worship of Tlaloc involved elaborate ceremonies designed to ensure adequate rainfall for the growing season. Rituals that acknowledged both the god's power to grant life and his equally important role as a force of destruction when the natural balance was disturbed. During times of drought, the people would gather on mountaintops to offer prayers and sacrifices, understanding that their appeals needed to reach the altitude where clouds formed and rain began its journey toward the earth. During the rainy season, different ceremonies would be performed to ensure that Tlaloc's gifts came in proper measure, bringing the gentle, steady rains that crops needed, rather than the torrential downpours that could wash away a season's worth of careful cultivation in a single afternoon. Equally important to daily survival was Tezcatlipoca Seven Serpent, the goddess of maize and all cultivated plants, whose annual cycle of death and rebirth paralleled the agricultural seasons, and whose divine essence was understood to reside within every grain of corn that sustained human life. She was depicted as a young woman carrying ears of maize, her face painted with the yellow color of ripe corn, her clothing decorated with symbols of fertility and abundance that marked her as the embodiment of the earth's generous capacity to transform seed and soil and water into the food that made civilization possible. The cultivation of maize was understood not merely as an agricultural technique, but as a form of religious practice, a way of participating directly in the divine creative process that brought life out of apparent death, abundance out of seeming emptiness, civilization out of wilderness. Every stage of the growing cycle, from the preparation of the soil through the final harvest, was accompanied by appropriate ceremonies and offerings, prayers that acknowledged the goddess's presence in the entire process and that recognized human beings as partners with the divine in the ongoing creation of sustenance and beauty. The transformation of maize into food was equally sacred, particularly the daily ritual of grinding corn on the metate, the three-legged grinding stone that was found in every Aztec household and that served as a kind of domestic altar where women would begin each day by participating in the fundamental mystery of nourishment. The rhythmic sound of the mano moving back and forth across the rough surface of the metod was understood as a form of prayer, a meditation that connected the immediate task of food preparation with the cosmic processes that made such preparation possible. In the realm of warfare, which was understood not merely as a political necessity but as a cosmic obligation, the supreme deity was Huitzilopochtli, the hummingbird god of the sun and war, whose daily journey across the sky represented the eternal battle between light and darkness, order and chaos, life and death that defined the essential nature of existence in the fifth sun. His name, which means hummingbird of the south, captured the paradoxical nature of his power. Like the tiny hummingbird, he possessed incredible energy and speed despite his small size, and like the sun itself, he combined life-giving warmth with destructive fire in a single divine essence that could nurture or annihilate depending on the circumstances. Huitzilopochtli was born fully grown and armed from the womb of Tlaloc, the earth goddess, at the moment when his 400 brothers and his sister, Quetzalcóatl, attempted to kill their mother out of shame at her pregnancy. His first act was to defend her by slaying his siblings and scattering their bodies across the sky, where they became the stars and the moon, establishing the cosmic order in which the sun would forever battle against the forces of darkness that sought to prevent each new dawn from breaking over the world. The worship of Huitzilopochtli involved the famous ritual of human sacrifice that has so often been misunderstood by those who view it through the lens of other religious traditions, but which the Aztecs understood as a necessary participation in the cosmic sacrifice that the gods themselves had made to create and sustain the universe. The hearts offered to Huitzilopochtli were understood to provide the energy he needed to complete his daily journey across the sky, to defeat the forces of darkness that would otherwise engulf the world in eternal night, and to ensure that the sun would rise again tomorrow to begin another cycle of life and growth and creative possibility. Yet another deity essential to daily life was Tlaloc, the flayed lord, whose dominion over agricultural renewal and the changing seasons made him one of the most important gods in the Aztec calendar. His name and his iconography, which showed him wearing the flayed skin of a sacrificial victim, might seem macabre to modern sensibilities, but to the Aztecs, he represented the profound truth that new life can only emerge through the death and transformation of old forms, that spring can only come through the apparent death of winter, that every harvest requires the sacrifice of the seed that was planted months before. The festival of Tlaloc, celebrated at the beginning of the agricultural year, involved ritual flaying that symbolically reenacted the process by which the earth sheds its old, dead surface to reveal the new life growing beneath. Priests would wear the skins of sacrificial victims for 20 days, during which time the skin would gradually decay and be shed, revealing the renewed flesh beneath, as a symbol of the agricultural cycle that was beginning to unfold throughout the valley. These gods of everyday life were not abstract theological concepts, but immediate, intimate presences who participated directly in the most mundane activities of human existence. They reminded the Aztecs that there was no separation between the sacred and the secular, between the cosmic and the personal, between the grand mythological dramas that played out in the heavens and the simple daily tasks that sustained human life on earth. Every meal was a communion with Tezcatlipoca. Every rainstorm was a visitation from Tlaloc. Every sunrise was a victory by Huitzilopochtli. Every change of season was a teaching from Tlaloc about the necessity and beauty of transformation. In the gentle darkness of night, as we reflect on these ancient ways of understanding the divine presence in everyday activities, we can begin to recognize the sacred dimensions of our own daily routines, the ways in which the simple acts of preparing food, tending plants, protecting those we love, and accepting the changes that time brings to our lives can become forms of worship, ways of participating consciously in the creative processes that sustain not only our individual existence, but the larger web of life of which we are part. The gods of everyday life remind us that the sacred is not something separate from ordinary existence, but the deeper dimension of meaning that can be discovered within the most common activities when they are performed with attention, gratitude, and awareness of their connection to the cosmic order that embraces and sustains all forms of life. The sacred calendar, time as a living god. Time, for the Aztecs, was not the neutral container within which events happen that we might imagine it to be. Not the uniform flow of moments measured by clocks and counted by calendars that serves as the invisible framework for our modern understanding of existence, but rather a living divine force that actively shaped the meaning and possibilities of every moment, every day, every year, in an intricate dance of cosmic energies that determined not only when things would happen, but how they would unfold, and what significance they would carry for both individuals and the entire community of conscious beings. The sacred calendar system that governed Aztec life was actually two interlocking calendars, each following its own rhythm, each contributing its own qualities to the complex symphony of temporal meaning that gave structure and purpose to human existence within the larger cosmic order. These calendars did not merely measure time, but created it, did not simply record the passage of days, but actively participated in bringing forth the specific qualities and potentials that each day would offer to those who knew how to read the subtle language of divine temporal communication. The tonal pahuli, or count of days, was a sacred calendar of 260 days, created by the intersection of 13 numbers with 20-day signs, each combination producing a unique temporal signature that influenced everything from the naming of children to the scheduling of ceremonies, from the planning of military campaigns to the timing of agricultural activities. This calendar was understood to reflect the rhythm of human gestation, the cosmic pregnancy that brings new consciousness into the world of physical experience. And its completion marked not just the end of a cycle, but the birth of new possibilities that had been developing in the hidden dimensions of divine creativity throughout the preceding months. The 20-day signs that formed the foundation of the Tonopahuli were not arbitrary symbols, but sacred representations of fundamental cosmic principles, each associated with particular gods, particular directions, particular qualities of consciousness that would predominate during the days ruled by that sign. Tezcatlipoca, the crocodile, brought the primal energy of beginnings, the fierce life force that emerges from the waters of creation. The wind carried the subtle intelligence that moves between all things and connects them in invisible networks of meaning and influence. Kali, the house, offered the protective energy of home and family, the sacred space within which consciousness could develop in safety and security. Each day sign was further modified by one of 13 numbers, each number adding its own layer of meaning to the temporal signature of any given day. The number 1 brought the energy of new beginnings, of seeds planted in fertile soil, of intentions crystallizing into the first stages of manifestation. The number 13 carried the culmination of the entire cycle, the completion of a cosmic process that had been developing through all the preceding numbers. The moment when potential became actuality and new cycles could begin. The Shupohwali, or count of years, was a solar calendar of 365 days divided into 18 months of 20 days each, plus 5 additional days that were considered particularly dangerous because they fell outside the normal pattern of temporal protection and divine guidance. This calendar governed the agricultural cycle and the great public ceremonies that synchronized human activity with the seasonal rhythms of the natural world, ensuring that planting and harvesting, building and warfare, celebration and reflection all occurred at the moments when cosmic conditions were most favorable for success. The intersection of these two calendars created a grand cycle of 52 years, at the end of which the same combination of day signs and year signs would repeat, marking the completion of what the Aztecs called a Shumulpili, or bundle of years. This moment was celebrated with the new fire ceremony, when all fires throughout the empire would be extinguished and a new sacred fire would be kindled to mark the beginning of a new cosmic age, a ritual that acknowledged both the cyclical nature of time and the constant possibility of renewal and transformation that such cycles made possible. The complexity of this calendar system required a specialized class of priests and diviners who spent their entire lives studying the intricate relationships between different temporal energies, learning to read the subtle signs that indicated what kinds of activities would be favored or discouraged on any given day, developing the wisdom necessary to guide individuals and communities in making decisions that aligned with rather than opposed the cosmic forces that were shaping each moment of existence. For a child born on the day 1 flower, for example, the calendar readers would know that this soul had entered the world under the influence of Quetzalcóatl, the goddess of love and beauty, and that the child's destiny would likely involve artistic creativity, romantic relationships, and the cultivation of beauty in its various forms. A child born on 7 would be understood to carry the energy of Tlaloc, the lord of the underworld, and might be destined for roles involving healing, divination, or the facilitation of transformation and renewal. These calendar readings were not understood as fixed fate that could not be changed, but rather as indications of the cosmic weather conditions that would prevail during a person's lifetime, the spiritual climate within which their individual choices and efforts would unfold. Just as a farmer needs to know the seasonal patterns of rain and drought in order to plant and harvest, successfully individuals needed to understand their temporal signature in order to make decisions that would align with rather than oppose the cosmic forces that were shaping their particular path through existence. The sacred calendar also determined the timing of the great ceremonial cycles that punctuated Aztec life throughout the year, ensuring that each festival and ritual occurred at the moment when the cosmic conditions were most favorable for communion with the particular deities being honored. The festival of Tezcatlipoca, dedicated to Tezcatlipoca, was timed to coincide with the dry season when the goddess' solar energy was at its most intense. The ceremony of Atlquawalo, honoring Tlaloc and the rain gods, was scheduled for the beginning of the rainy season when the earth was preparing to receive the life-giving waters that would nourish the year's crops. Perhaps most significantly, the sacred calendar served as a constant reminder that human beings were not separate from the cosmic order, but integral participants in its ongoing evolution, that every choice made by individuals contributed to the larger pattern of creation and destruction that defines the fifth sun, and that conscious alignment with temporal rhythms was one of the most important forms of spiritual practice available to those who sought to live in harmony with divine will. In the gentle darkness of night, as we contemplate this ancient understanding of time as a living force, rather than a neutral container, we can begin to recognize the rhythms and cycles that continue to shape our own existence, the subtle ways in which different seasons and different moments carry their own particular energies and possibilities. The Aztec calendar reminds us that time is not something we simply endure or consume, but something we can learn to dance with, something we can align with, something that offers its own gifts and teachings to those who develop the sensitivity to receive them. Even in our modern world of digital clocks and appointment schedules, we can still feel the deeper rhythms that the sacred calendar was designed to illuminate. The way that spring brings different possibilities than winter. The way that morning energy differs from evening energy. The way that certain moments seem pregnant with potential, while others feel like times for rest and reflection. In understanding time as the Aztecs did as a divine force that actively participates in shaping the meaning of existence, we begin to experience our own lives not as random sequences of events, but as conscious participation in the cosmic dance that has been unfolding since the first dawn of the fifth sun and will continue until the earthquakes of four movement bring this age to its completion and prepare the way for whatever new form of beauty will emerge from the creative destruction that defines the eternal rhythm of cosmic time. Myths of heroes and mortals. When humans met the divine. In the rich tapestry of Aztec mythology, the boundary between the human and divine realms was not an impermeable wall, but rather a permeable membrane through which extraordinary individuals could pass, sometimes ascending from mortal existence to divine status, sometimes serving as vessels through which the gods could manifest their will in the world of everyday human experience. These stories of heroes and god-kings of mortals who achieved divine recognition and deities who chose to walk among humans reveal the Aztec understanding that consciousness itself exists on a spectrum rather than in discrete categories, and that under certain circumstances human awareness could expand to encompass divine perspective, while divine consciousness could contract itself to fit within the limitations of mortal form. The most famous and significant of these liminal figures was Tlaloc, Quetzalcóatl, whose very name reveals the complex relationship between historical person and mythological archetype that characterizes so many Aztec heroic narratives. Tlaloc, meaning one reed, was his birth name, according to the sacred calendar, marking him as a child born under the influence of the day sign that governed new beginnings, creative inspiration, and the delicate balance between heaven and earth. Tezcatlipoca, meaning our young prince, indicated his royal status as heir to the throne of Tolan, the legendary city that represented the pinnacle of Mesoamerican civilization. Quetzalcóatl, the feathered serpent, was the name of the god whose divine essence he embodied during his reign, suggesting that he was not merely a human ruler who worshipped this deity, but rather a human vessel through which the god chose to experience mortal existence and implement divine will in the world of politics and culture. According to the chronicles that blend history and mythology in the distinctive Aztec manner, Quetzalcóatl ruled Tolan during a golden age when art and learning flourished to a degree never seen before or since. When the corn grew so large that a single ear could provide a meal for an entire family. When cotton grew naturally in all colors so that dyeing was unnecessary. When the very stones sang with the harmony that pervaded all aspects of life in this perfectly ordered society. Under his guidance, the people learned to measure time with unprecedented accuracy to create architectural wonders that seemed to defy the laws of physics, to develop forms of artistic expression so beautiful that they appeared to be gifts from the gods themselves rather than products of human creativity. Yet this perfection carried within it the seeds of its own destruction. For in the Aztec understanding, any system that achieves complete harmony inevitably becomes static, and static systems cannot adapt to the constant changes that define existence in the fifth sun. The god Tezcatlipoca, perhaps recognizing that Tolan's very perfection threatened to arrest the cosmic evolution that requires periodic destruction and renewal, appeared in the city in various disguises, each designed to introduce the element of chaos that would eventually bring about the civilization's transformation. First, he came as an old man selling chilies in the marketplace. But these were magical chilies that caused everyone who ate them to dance uncontrollably until they collapsed from exhaustion, introducing into the perfectly ordered city the first experience of behavior that could not be controlled by reason or will. Next, he appeared as a young warrior, naked and foreign, whose very presence in the central plaza caused such scandal and excitement that riots broke out among the citizens, revealing the powerful undercurrents of passion and violence that had been suppressed by the city's emphasis on harmony and restraint. Most devastatingly, Tezcatlipoca came to Tapleton Quetzalcóatl, himself in the form of a wise counselor who convinced the god king that he needed to drink pulque, the fermented cactus wine, in order to cure a mysterious illness that had begun to weaken his divine powers. The alcohol loosened Quetzalcóatl's careful control over his desires and led him to break his vows of celibacy by sleeping with his sister, an act that violated the fundamental principles upon which his rule and the city's prosperity were based. When Tapleton Quetzalcóatl awoke the next morning and realized what he had done, his shame and self-recrimination were so profound that he could no longer bear to remain in the city he had created and ruled with such wisdom and benevolence. He gathered his most loyal followers and began a long journey toward the eastern sea, promising that he would one day returned to reclaim his throne and restore the golden age that his fall from grace had brought to an end. At the edge of the ocean, according to some versions of the story, Tapleton Quetzalcóatl built a funeral pyre and threw himself into the flames, his burning body rising to become the planet Venus, the morning star that heralds each new dawn and serves as an eternal reminder that even the most complete failures can be transformed into sources of light and guidance for future generations. Other versions suggest that he sailed away across the eastern waters on a raft made of serpents, disappearing beyond the horizons, but leaving behind the promise that he would return from the same direction when the time was right for the restoration of wisdom and justice to the world. This myth of Tapleton Quetzalcóatl's departure and promised return became one of the most powerful and persistent themes in Mesoamerican culture, influencing political and religious developments for centuries after the fall of Tollan, and eventually playing a crucial role in the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire, when and his men arrived from the Eastern Sea. In 1519, many Aztecs initially believed that they were witnessing the fulfillment of the ancient prophecy, the return of the God King, who would restore the Golden Age and bring justice to a world that had fallen into corruption and decay. Other heroic figures in Aztec mythology followed similar patterns of apotheosis of human beings, who achieved such extraordinary development of consciousness that they transcended the normal limitations of mortal existence and became divine or semi-divine beings, capable of influencing cosmic processes. Its Popolotl, the obsidian butterfly, began as a mortal woman, whose beauty and wisdom were so remarkable that she attracted the attention of the gods themselves, eventually transforming into a skeletal goddess whose butterfly wings were made of volcanic glass and who ruled over the paradise where women who died in childbirth would spend eternity. Meothul, the goddess of the maguey plant and the fermented pulque made from its sap, was originally a mortal maiden whose knowledge of plant medicine and fermentation was so advanced that she became the divine patroness of all healing and intoxication, teaching humanity the proper use of substances that could expand consciousness and facilitate communication with the spirit world, while also warning of the dangers that accompanied such powerful tools for transformation. These stories of mortals who achieved divine status were balanced by equally important narratives of gods who chose to experience human existence, deities who incarnated in mortal form in order to understand more fully the challenges and opportunities that faced conscious beings in the world of the fifth sun. Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, was said to have been born as a human child from the earth goddess Tlaloc, experiencing a normal human birth and childhood, before manifesting his divine powers and ascending to his role as the supreme deity of the Aztec Empire. Even more significantly, many of the gods were understood to be present within every human being as potentials for consciousness development, divine seeds that could be cultivated through proper spiritual practice, until the individual achieved a level of awareness that transcended normal human limitations and approached divine perspective. The Aztec concept of Teotl, divine power, was not something external to human nature, but rather the deepest essence of consciousness itself, the spark of creative intelligence that connected every individual awareness to the cosmic consciousness that dreamed all worlds into existence. In the gentle darkness of night, as we contemplate these ancient stories of the permeable boundary between human and divine consciousness, we can begin to recognize within ourselves the same potential for transcendence, that characterized the heroes and god-kings of Aztec mythology. The divine spark that transformed Quetzalcóatl from a mortal prince into a cosmic deity exists within every human heart, waiting to be awakened through the cultivation of wisdom, compassion, and conscious participation in the creative processes that sustain the universe. The heroes of Aztec mythology remind us that we are not merely passive recipients of divine grace, but active participants in our own spiritual evolution, beings capable of ascending from ordinary human consciousness to divine awareness through our choices, our practices, and our willingness to sacrifice our smaller selves for the sake of something larger and more beautiful and more enduring than individual existence. In understanding their journeys from mortality to divinity, we begin to understand our own lives as opportunities for transformation, as chances to develop the consciousness that can bridge the apparent gap between human and divine, and discover the unity that has always existed beneath the surface of apparent separation. The poetry of the Aztecs, flowers, songs, and transients. In the sophisticated civilization that flourished in the Valley of Mexico, poetry was not merely an artistic ornament or a leisure activity for the educated elite, but rather a sacred technology of consciousness, a way of using language to capture and transmit the most subtle and profound insights about the nature of existence itself. The Aztec poets, known as forjadores de cantos, or forgers of songs, understood that words possessed the power to create reality as well as describe it, that the careful arrangement of syllables and images could open doorways between the visible and invisible worlds, and that certain combinations of sound and meaning could induce states of consciousness in which the listener could directly experience the divine perspectives that usually remained hidden behind the veil of ordinary awareness. The central metaphor of Aztec poetic philosophy was flower and song, in flor y canto, a paired concept that represented the highest form of truth accessible to human consciousness. Flowers, with their ephemeral beauty and intoxicating fragrance, symbolized the immediate, sensory dimension of truth, the way that divine reality could be experienced directly through the senses when they were properly attuned to the sacred nature of existence. Songs, with their ability to move the heart and transport the listener to other realms of experience, represented the eternal dimension of truth, the way that certain insights and experiences could transcend the limitations of time and space and connect individual consciousness with the cosmic awareness that dreams all worlds into being. Together, flower and song created a form of truth that was neither purely physical nor purely spiritual, but rather a synthesis of both dimensions, a way of knowing that engaged the whole being rather than just the intellectual faculties. This was truth as living experience rather than abstract concept, truth as transformative encounter rather than static information, truth as participation in the divine creative process rather than mere observation of its results. The great poet King Nezahualcóyotl of Texcoco, whose name means fasting coyote and who ruled during the 15th century, exemplified this approach to poetry as spiritual practice and philosophical investigation. His poems, which have survived in fragments through oral tradition and colonial-era transcriptions, reveal a consciousness that had achieved remarkable depth of insight into the fundamental questions that define human existence: the nature of the divine, the meaning of mortality, the relationship between individual consciousness and cosmic awareness, and the possibility of finding authentic happiness in a world characterized by constant change and inevitable loss. One of his most famous verses captures the essential spirit of Aztec poetic philosophy with crystalline clarity. Is it true that one lives on earth? Not forever on earth, only a little while here. Though it be jade, it will be broken. Though it be gold, it will pass away. Though it be Quetzal feather, it will come to an end. Not forever on earth, only a little while here. In these simple lines, the poet acknowledges the transient nature of all earthly beauty and value, while simultaneously celebrating the preciousness that emerges precisely from such transience. The way that knowing something will not last forever makes its present existence infinitely more poignant and meaningful. This theme of impermanence runs through virtually all surviving Aztec poetry, like a golden thread, not as a source of despair or nihilistic resignation, but as a foundation for a deeper appreciation of the beauty and meaning that can be found within the brief span of human existence. The poets understood that the very fragility of life, the very uncertainty of duration, was what gave each moment its weight and significance, what transformed ordinary experiences into opportunities for direct encounter with the sacred dimensions of existence. Another recurring theme in Aztec poetry was the question of whether anything created by human beings could achieve permanence in a universe characterized by constant change and transformation. The poets were deeply aware that their own civilizations, no matter how magnificent, were temporary phenomena that would eventually pass away like all previous civilizations. And they struggled with the question of whether art and poetry and wisdom could transcend the physical forms in which they were embodied and achieve some form of eternal existence. "Will my songs still be sung tomorrow?" asks one anonymous poet. "Will my flowers still bloom in some other springtime? What can I take with me when I leave this world? What will remain of my life when I am gone?" These questions, which might seem merely melancholy to modern readers, were understood by the Aztecs as the beginning of wisdom, the recognition that authentic meaning could only be found by accepting rather than denying the transient nature of individual existence. Yet this acceptance of impermanence did not lead to passive resignation, but rather to a more intense engagement with the present moment, a more complete dedication to creating beauty and meaning within the brief span of time available to human consciousness. If nothing lasts forever, then the flower that blooms today becomes infinitely precious precisely because it will fade tomorrow. If no song can be sung forever, then the song that is being sung right now deserves our complete attention and appreciation. The Aztec poets also explored the paradoxical relationship between individual identity and cosmic consciousness, recognizing that the self, that experiences mortality and limitation, is simultaneously connected to something eternal and unlimited. I, Quetzalcóatl, ask this: is it true that one lives on earth? Not forever on earth, only a little while here. My heart rises up. Is it somewhere I will be able to feel joy? In what way do I live? In what way do I endure? I am like the flower that withers. I pass away like a shadow. Yet somehow I remain. Somehow I continue. Somehow I participate in the eternal song that never ends. This sense of participating in something larger and more enduring than individual existence provided the foundation for the Aztec understanding of how human beings could find authentic meaning despite their mortality. by aligning themselves with the cosmic creative process, by contributing their own small verses to the infinite song of existence, by adding their own brief blooms to the eternal garden of consciousness. Individuals could transcend the limitations of their particular incarnations and become part of the immortal creativity that dreams all worlds into being. The actual composition and performance of poetry in Aztec society was a highly ritualized activity that took place in specially designated spaces called quicali, or houses of song, where poet-priests would gather to create and share their verbal offerings to the gods. These sessions combined poetry with music and dance, creating multimedia experiences that engaged all the senses and transported participants into altered states of consciousness, where the boundaries between individual and cosmic awareness could dissolve temporarily. The poets understood that their role was not merely to entertain or to express personal emotions, but to serve as intermediaries between the human and divine realms, translating cosmic insights into forms that ordinary consciousness could apprehend and appreciate. They were, in essence, shamans of language, using their mastery of words and images to guide their audiences on journeys into the deeper dimensions of reality that usually remained hidden beneath the surface of everyday experience. In the gentle darkness of night, as we listen to these ancient voices speaking across the centuries about the eternal themes of beauty and transience, meaning and mortality, individual identity and cosmic consciousness, we can recognize in their words the same questions and concerns that continue to define human existence in every age. The Aztec poets remind us that poetry is not a luxury or a decoration, but a necessity, a way of using language to explore and express the most profound aspects of what it means to be conscious beings in a universe of overwhelming beauty and mystery. Their understanding of flower and song as the highest form of truth available to human consciousness offers us a way of approaching our own creative activities, our own attempts to capture and share the insights and experiences that matter most deeply to us. Whether we express ourselves through words or images, through music or movement, through scientific investigation or spiritual practice, we are participating in the same fundamental human activity that the Aztec poets called the forging of songs, the creation of beauty that acknowledges its own transience, while simultaneously participating in something eternal and inexhaustible. As we prepare to rest in the embrace of night, we can carry with us the wisdom of these ancient singers, who found in the very brevity of existence a reason for celebration rather than sorrow, who discovered in the fragility of all earthly beauty an invitation to love more completely rather than less, who understood that the highest human achievement is to create flowers and songs that honor both the temporary and the eternal dimensions of the mystery in which we find ourselves blessed to participate. The fall of the gods, the arrival of strangers. In the early decades of the 16th century, as the fifth sun continued its ancient journey across the skies above the Valley of Mexico, a series of omens began to appear that seemed to suggest some fundamental disruption in the cosmic order that had governed Aztec civilization for centuries. These were not ordinary portents of change, such as might herald the transition from one ruler to another, or the shift from one season to the next, but rather signs of such extraordinary and disturbing nature that they appeared to herald the end of an entire age, the completion of a cosmic cycle that would transform not only the political and social structures of Mesoamerican civilization, but the very relationship between human consciousness and divine reality. The first of these omens was a fire that appeared in the eastern sky at midnight, burning steadily for an entire year without any visible source of fuel, casting an eerie light over the sleeping city of Tenochtitlan and causing widespread anxiety among the population, who understood such phenomena as communications from the spirit world. The second was the spontaneous combustion of the Temple of under circumstances that made no natural sense, occurring on a clear day without storms or clouds, leaving behind the acrid smell of supernatural destruction. Other omens followed in rapid succession: a comet that appeared during daylight hours and was visible for days, dividing into 3 parts before disappearing. Strange voices heard weeping in the night, crying out warnings that disaster was approaching from the eastern sea. The birth of 2-headed animals and other monstrous creatures that seemed to suggest some fundamental disruption in the natural order. The appearance of men with pale skin and strange clothing who seemed to walk on the water of the most disturbing omen of all was reported by fishermen who claimed to have captured a bird that resembled a crane but carried on its head a mirror-like surface in which could be seen images of armed warriors riding upon unknown beasts coming from across the eastern waters with weapons and banners unlike anything in the Aztec world. When this bird was brought to Moctezuma, the emperor looked into the mirror on its head and saw the same vision. But when he called for his priests and wise men to interpret what he had seen, the bird vanished before they could examine it, leaving behind only the memory of an impossible sight that seemed to predict the arrival of forces that would challenge everything the Aztecs understood about their place in the cosmic order. These omens were interpreted by the priests and diviners as possible harbingers of the return of Quetzalcóatl, the god-king who had departed centuries earlier with the promise that he would one day come back from the eastern sea to reclaim his throne and restore the golden age of wisdom and justice that had been lost when he fell from grace and fled into exile. The timing seemed particularly significant, for the year 1519 in the Christian calendar corresponded to CE Akado, one read in the Aztec calendar the same date that had marked Quetzalcóatl's birth and that he had prophesied would mark his return. When Spanish ships appeared on the eastern horizon, carrying men with pale skin and strange clothing who possessed weapons and animals unknown to the indigenous peoples of the Americas, many Aztecs initially interpreted their arrival as the fulfillment of the ancient prophecy. The leader of the Spanish expedition seemed to match certain aspects of the descriptions of the returning god-king. He came from the east, as promised. He arrived in the prophesied year. He possessed knowledge and power that seemed supernatural to people who had never encountered European technology and military tactics. Yet, as the encounter between Spanish and Aztec civilizations unfolded, it became increasingly clear that whatever cosmic significance these events might possess, they did not represent the simple return of Quetzalcóatl and the restoration of the Golden Age. Instead, they marked the beginning of a collision between 2 entirely different ways of understanding reality. 2 incompatible systems of meaning that could not coexist peacefully within the same geographical and cultural space. The Spanish conquistadors brought with them not only superior military technology, but also a religious and philosophical worldview that was fundamentally opposed to the Aztec understanding of the sacred nature of existence. where the Aztecs saw a universe filled with divine presence, animated by conscious forces that required constant attention and ceremonial acknowledgement. The Spanish saw a world of material resources to be exploited, and indigenous peoples to be converted to their particular form of Christianity, or eliminated as obstacles to their colonial ambitions. The destruction of Tenochtitlan in 1521, accomplished through a combination of European military advantages and indigenous allies who hoped to use Spanish power to overthrow Aztec hegemony, represented more than just the fall of a particular political entity. It marked the end of a cosmic age, the completion of the fifth sun, in a manner that the ancient prophecies had not fully anticipated, a transformation so profound that it changed not only the political and social structures of Mesoamerica, but the very fabric of reality, as experienced by the indigenous peoples who had shaped their entire existence around participation in the mythological narratives that gave meaning to their lives. The temples were destroyed, their stones used to build Christian churches. The sacred codices were burned as works of the devil. Their astronomical and mythological knowledge lost forever, except for fragments preserved in the memories of those who survived the conquest. The elaborate calendar systems that had synchronized human activity with cosmic rhythms were replaced by the linear time of Christian eschatology, which promised salvation in a future heaven rather than participation in eternal cycles of creation and renewal. Most significantly, the gods themselves seemed to fall silent, withdrawing from active participation in human affairs as their temples were demolished and their ceremonies forbidden. The complex web of ritual and sacrifice that had maintained the cosmic order for centuries was severed, leaving the survivors of the conquest to navigate a world in which the divine presence that had once animated every aspect of existence had become hidden, distant, or apparently absent altogether. Yet even in this apparent defeat, the deeper wisdom of Aztec mythology remained relevant. For the concept of the five suns had always included the understanding that every cosmic age must eventually come to an end, must be destroyed and transformed so that new forms of consciousness and civilization could emerge from the creative destruction that defines the cosmic process. The arrival of the Spanish and the fall of the Aztec Empire could be understood not as the defeat of divine truth by demonic forces, but as another turn of the cosmic wheel, another iteration of the eternal cycle of creation and destruction that had already brought for previous worlds to their completion. From this perspective, the conquest was neither pure tragedy nor pure triumph, but rather a cosmic catastrophe in the original sense of that word. A fundamental turning, a transformation so complete that it created entirely new possibilities for consciousness and culture, while simultaneously ending forever the particular forms of beauty and wisdom that had characterized the age that was passing away. In the gentle darkness of night, as we contemplate this ancient story of cosmic endings and new beginnings, we can recognize in the fall of the Aztec gods something that speaks to our own contemporary experience of living through times of profound transformation. When familiar certainties dissolve and new realities emerge that require us to develop new ways of understanding our place in the cosmic order. The silence of the gods that followed the conquest reminds us that divine presence does not always manifest in the forms we expect or prefer, and that sometimes the most profound spiritual teachings come through experiences of loss, and disorientation that force consciousness to evolve beyond its previous limitations. The fall of the gods was not the end of the divine presence in the world, but rather its transformation into new forms that could survive and flourish under radically changed conditions, forms that continue to influence and inspire those who know how to listen for the whispers of ancient wisdom that still echo through the ruins of fallen civilizations and the dreams of those who remember that every ending is also a beginning. Echoes of the fifth sun, reflections in the night sky. As our long journey through the mythological landscape of ancient Mexico draws toward its close, as the final embers of these cosmic stories settle into the quiet spaces of memory and dream, we find ourselves returning to the place where we began, the threshold between sleeping and waking, between the world of ordinary consciousness and the realm of divine imagination, between the historical moment in which we live and the eternal patterns that continue to shape the evolution of consciousness throughout all the cycles of cosmic time. The gods we have encountered in these tales, Quetzalcóatl and Tezcatlipoca, Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli, Mictlantecutli and Chicomcotl, and all the others who populate the rich pantheon of Aztec mythology, were never merely ancient superstitions or primitive explanations for natural phenomena that modern science has rendered obsolete. They were, and remain, representations of the fundamental forces and principles that continue to operate within human consciousness and cosmic evolution, personifications of the creative tensions and harmonious balances that give meaning and purpose to existence at every level, from the most intimate personal experience to the grandest cosmic processes. Its journey across the sky of consciousness continues to illuminate the eternal questions that define what it means to be human in a universe of such overwhelming beauty and complexity. The earthquakes of four movement that will eventually bring this cosmic age to its completion may manifest not as literal geological catastrophes, but as the profound transformations of understanding that occur when consciousness evolves beyond its current limitations and develops new capacities for wisdom, compassion, and creative participation in the ongoing evolution of reality itself. In our modern world of electric lights and digital communication, yet the deeper truth, whispered through the darkness by voices that remember when the boundary between myth and reality was as thin as morning mist, is that we have not transcended these ancient patterns, but have simply dressed them in new costumes, have not eliminated the fundamental mysteries of existence, but have simply found new ways to avoid or ignore them. The cosmic drama that the Aztecs understood as the eternal dance between Quetzalcóatl and Tezcatlipoca continues to unfold within every human heart that struggles to balance wisdom with power, creativity with destruction, the desire to build lasting civilizations with the recognition that all forms of order are temporary and must eventually give way to new possibilities. The sacrifice of Nana Watson that created the fifth sun is reenacted every time someone chooses to give their life. Energy in service of something larger and more beautiful than individual survival and success. The journey through Mictlan that awaits every soul after death continues to represent the profound transformation of consciousness that occurs not only at the moment of physical death, but throughout every process of authentic spiritual development, every genuine encounter with the deeper dimensions of reality that lie hidden beneath the surface of ordinary experience. The gods of rain and maize and war continue to manifest through the natural forces and human activities that sustain life on this planet reminding us that the sacred and the secular are not separate realms but different aspects of a single cosmic process that includes and transcends both. Perhaps most significantly, the Aztec understanding of time as a living god rather than a neutral container continues to offer profound insights for those who seek to live in conscious alignment with the rhythms and cycles that govern both natural and spiritual evolution. The sacred calendar that synchronized human activity with cosmic patterns reminds us that every moment carries its own particular possibilities and challenges, its own gifts and teachings, its own opportunities for growth and transformation. The poetry of flower and song that captured the essence of Aztec philosophical understanding continues to inspire those who recognize that truth is not merely an intellectual concept, but a living experience that engages the whole being. Even the fall of the gods that accompanied the Spanish conquest continues to speak to our contemporary experience of living through times of profound cultural and spiritual transformation. When familiar certainties dissolve and new realities emerge that require us to develop new ways of understanding our place in the cosmic order. As we lie in the gentle embrace of night, listening to these ancient echoes, reverberating through the corridors of memory and dream, we can begin to recognize that we are not separate from the mythological process, but active participants in it. Our struggles to understand and our willingness to remain open to mystery. The gods have not died, but have withdrawn into the hidden dimensions of reality, where they continue their eternal work of creation, waiting for those who develop the sensitivity to perceive their presence and the wisdom to align with their cosmic purposes. They speak through the language of synchronicity and symbol through the unexpected encounters and meaningful coincidences that remind us that we live in a universe far more alive and conscious and responsive than the mechanical cosmos described by reductionist science. Across all boundaries of space and time and species, and enables them to participate together in the cosmic evolution that is larger and more wonderful than any individual understanding could ever encompass. In the deepest hours of night, when the boundary between sleeping and waking becomes most permeable, when the rational mind relaxes its vigilant control over perception and allows other forms of awareness to emerge, we can sometimes hear the ancient songs still being sung, can sometimes see the eternal dances still being danced, can sometimes feel ourselves remembered and held by forces of love and wisdom that have guided the ancestors. Was not a primitive stage of human development that we have transcended, but rather a way of understanding and relating to reality that we have temporarily forgotten and that we desperately need to recover. If we are to navigate successfully the challenges and opportunities that await us in the uncertain future toward which our own cosmic age is rapidly evolving, the echoes of the fifth sun continue to reverberate through the night sky of consciousness, continue to offer their guidance and wisdom to those who remember how to listen with the ear of the heart rather than the mind alone, continue to invite us to participate consciously in the eternal creativity that dreams all worlds into existence and loves them enough to let them go when their time of transformation has arrived. As sleep begins to claim us and the boundaries of individual awareness start to dissolve into the larger consciousness that holds and sustains all dreams, all myths, all stories, all the countless forms that awareness has taken and will take throughout the infinite cycles of cosmic time, we can rest in the profound peace that comes from knowing that we are part of something much larger, part of the eternal song that the universe sings to itself through every conscious being that has ever existed or ever will exist. The gods are dreaming still, and we are both the dreamers and the dreamed, both the storytellers and the stories, both the singers and the songs that rise like incense smoke to touch the face of mystery itself. In the gentle darkness of night, in the sacred space between heartbeats, in the eternal moment that contains all time, the fifth sun continues its ancient journey across the sky of consciousness, illuminating the path that leads from separation back to unity, from forgetting back to remembering, from the illusion of isolation back to the reality of love that connects all things in the cosmic dance that began before time, had a name, and will continue long after the last star has faded into the infinite silence from which all music originally emerges. Sleep well, dreamers of the fifth sun. The ancient stories will be here when you awaken, waiting to continue their eternal conversation with every consciousness that seeks to understand its place in the cosmic order that embraces and sustains all existence. The gods are patient, and their love is infinite, and their dreams include every possibility that consciousness can imagine or create. Rest now in the knowledge that you are held by forces of wisdom and compassion that are older than the mountains and newer than your next breath, that know you more completely than you know yourself, and love you more deeply than you have ever dared to hope. The night sky remembers everything, forgets nothing, and in its vast embrace, all the stories of all the worlds that have been, and all the worlds that are yet to come, continue their eternal dance of meaning and beauty, creation and transformation, ending and beginning, in the cosmic symphony that plays forever, in the heart of the mystery that has no name but calls itself by every name that love has ever whispered in the darkness.